I'm Frida Bambridge, 77 years old, and if there's one thing I've always done well, it's keep my life in order. My grocery lists are color-coded, my finances are spotless, and my recipes are written in neat cursive on index cards in a wooden box. My husband Gordon used to say I was the only person who balanced a checkbook for fun. The apartment I live in now is small, one-bedroom, just me and the mint on the balcony. Most folks who pass by wouldn't guess that behind these quiet curtains is a woman with over $500,000 in assets and not a soul in the world to spend it on before I go any further. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in the very place you once called home. My world has always been numbers and systems. I worked for the IRS most of my adult life, not the most glamorous job, but it gave me structure. Gordon was an engineer, steady and thoughtful, and we lived modestly in South St. Paul. We raised one child, our son Quentin, after a complicated pregnancy. The doctors told us he'd be our only, and maybe that's why we gave him everything. He was the center of our universe. We bought him his first car, sent him to a private college, helped with the wedding, and when he married, Hope, Gordon, and I bought them a house, a 2-story colonial with a big backyard. The kind of place we never had when we were starting out. It was in our name for tax reasons, but Quentin lived in it as if it were his own. We never asked for real rent, just a symbolic amount now and then, enough to keep things tidy on paper. The payments started coming late over the past year, then stopped completely. I didn't say anything. The last thing I wanted was to stir up more tension. Our relationship had already become brittle. Quentin called when he needed help. Never just to talk. The grandkids barely knew me. Olivia is 16, always on her phone. Derek is 14 and locked into some video game or another. I see them maybe twice a year when I bring pie or a check. 3 days ago, I got a message on my answering machine. Mom, Derek needs a new computer for school. It's urgent. Call me back. No. Hello? No. How are you? Just a price tag and a demand? I called him later that evening. He sounded irritated, said he'd called hours ago. And where had I been? Book club, I told him. Doris Wilcox's new novel was the topic. He didn't even ask if I liked it, just said Derek's laptop was broken and needed replacing a special one for graphic design. $1,200. I said I'd help, like I always do. And that's when he invited me to dinner. Said Hope was cooking, said the kids would love to see me. Asked if I'd bring my apple pie, my grandmother's recipe. The only thing he seems to remember. I do well. So on Saturday, I put on my best navy suit, the one with the pearl brooch Gordon gave me for our 30th, and called a cab to the house we'd bought them. The neighborhood looked different now, all sleek landscaping and shiny SUVs Hope had insisted on redoing. The stone path 2 years ago? Said the old one was outdated. I paid for half of it. Olivia opened the door. Didn't look up from her phone, just mumbled a hello and let me in. The house had changed too. New furniture, new art. Nothing left from the early years when Gordon and I helped them pick things out. I offered to help in the kitchen, but Hope waved me off. She was on the phone barking at someone about a recipe. Quentin was outside, fiddling with a massive new grill. Derek was upstairs playing a game. I sat in the living room, watching the pie grow cold beside me. No one asked how I'd been, or offered me a glass of water. Even Quentin only perked up when he mentioned the grill. Said it had Wi-Fi, like it was a spaceship. I didn't ask how they paid for it. I already knew what he'd say. Something about quality of life. Not everything being about money at dinner. The food was too spicy for me. I picked at a salad. Hope asked if I didn't like her cooking, I said. My doctor advised avoiding spicy foods, she rolled. Her eyes said I should have mentioned it before they all talked about their week schoolwork. People I didn't know. I asked Olivia about her music lessons. She said she quit. Derek barely looked up from his tablet when I asked about the computer after dinner. I helped clear the plates while Hope explained how the old furniture had been embarrassing and that her social circle expected a certain standard. I nodded. Said, tastes change though inside. I was wondering when I'd stopped being welcome at their table later, as we sat in the living room. She brought out wine and asked how I liked my apartment, said she'd seen a segment about modern retirement communities. Maybe I'd be happier in one, she said. There'd be staff around people to talk to, and it would take the pressure off them. I looked at her face, at her carefully chosen words, and for the first time, I realized they'd already made a plan. One where I was no longer in it. And when Quentin walked in and mentioned that the house being in my name was creating complications, legal ones, tax ones, I finally saw it clear as day. They didn't just want me in a facility, they wanted the house too. And they wanted it now. Quentin stood there with his arms crossed, still holding that casual look he always used when trying to soften hard news. He said it again more gently this time, that it just made sense for the house to finally be in their name. He talked about refinancing, about building equity, how it would open new financial doors for them. Hope walked in mid-sentence, drying her hands on a towel, and chimed in like they'd practiced it beforehand. She said they'd found a place she wanted me to visit. Not a nursing home, she said, something different. An independent living community. Clean, modern, with a garden and activities and a 24-hour emergency response system. She made it sound like a resort. I asked when they wanted me to see it. Saturday, Quentin said. He'd pick me up at 1. No need to bring anything, just come and take a look. When they turned their attention back to the television, I stood there for a minute, hands clasped, not saying much. Then I walked into the hallway, took my coat from the hook, and told them I'd call a cab. Quentin looked up, surprised. What about your pie? I told him to save it for the kids. I didn't wait for an answer. The cab pulled up 5 minutes later. I gave the driver the name of a hotel out by the old train yard near where Gordon and I used to go for anniversary dinners. I checked in under my full name, asked for a quiet room if they had one, and settled in without unpacking. That night, I couldn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. I sat up in the chair by the window and listened to the heating unit hum. The next morning, I opened the drawer in my purse and pulled out the letter from Brighton Developments, the one I'd been ignoring for weeks. Their offer had gone up again, $675,000 for the house. A number I couldn't quite believe. I dialed the number on the letter. A young woman answered and put me through to someone named Lloyd. His voice was clipped professional, too cheerful for that hour of the morning. When I told him my name, there was a pause, then a change in tone. He said he'd been hoping to hear from me. Said the company was still very much interested in the property. He mentioned zoning shifts, something about residential priority corridors. I asked him what would happen to the people currently living in the house. He said standard practice was 30 days notice, after closing maybe 60 if we wanted to extend it. I asked if the house would be torn down. He said yes, it would. That night, I didn't open the photo album on the bedside table. I already knew every picture inside. The one of Quentin at 3 with Gordon's ball cap pulled down over his eyes. The one of me on the porch holding his science fair ribbon. The house sat in the background in almost all of them. The next morning, I met Lloyd and their legal representative at their downtown office. They offered coffee, which I declined. I wore the same navy blue suit I'd worn to the last 3 funerals I'd attended. I asked questions, requested changes to phrasing, made sure every section matched state law. I insisted on one condition: the family was not to be notified until the final legal window. Lloyd nodded. Miss Wilde, the attorney, made notes in the margin. I signed the preliminary agreement with a steady hand. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed at the hotel. I didn't answer Quentin's calls. I didn't open his messages. Most of them were short, "Mom, where are you?" followed by longer ones. This is ridiculous. I'm worried. Call me, please. The sale closed on a Thursday morning. The money hit my account by lunchtime. I went back to my hotel room and turned on my phone. There were dozens of missed calls. Olivia had even tried once, which surprised me. Her message was brief. "Grandma, are you okay?" By that evening, I'd received the first angry call. It was Quentin. He was shouting from the moment I picked up. Said an eviction notice had arrived. Said it had to be a mistake. Said I couldn't possibly have done this to him. I told him there was no mistake. He kept asking why I'd sell the house, why I'd blindside him, why now. I reminded him it was never his house. It had always been in my name. I told him I was just following his suggestion that if I couldn't let go of control, maybe I should leave and stay out of their lives. He said I'd twisted his words. He said I was being petty. He said I'd ruined everything. I told him the contract he'd signed 20 years ago allowed for exactly this situation. 30 days notice, no penalties, no breach. He accused me of betrayal. I let him. I told him I'd consider helping with the down payment if they wanted to buy their own place. A loan. No interest. Repayable over 5 years. He hung up without answering. The next few days, I started looking for something permanent. A real apartment, not a hotel room with a view of a parking lot. I called Eunice and asked if she still had contacts in real estate. She said she did. Within a week, she'd lined up 3 viewings. I chose the third, an apartment in Riverside Plaza with wide windows, clean lines, and a balcony that caught the morning sun. It cost more than I'd ever paid in rent, but I could afford it now. 2 days later, I received another call from Quentin. This time, he was calm. He wanted to meet in person. He said we needed to talk like adults. He chose a quiet cafe downtown. I said yes. When I arrived, he wasn't alone. There was a man with him wearing a dark suit and holding a leather briefcase. A lawyer. I ordered tea and sat down across from them. Quentin didn't meet my eyes at first. The lawyer opened the meeting by saying he understood the legality of my decision, but questioned the morality of it. Said I had placed my son's family in an impossible situation. Said it was a reputational blow, a financial disaster. Then they made their proposal. A 90-day extension, $100,000 in compensation. I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I responded with my own offer 30 days' notice, as stated in the contract. $50,000. As a loan. 5-year term. No interest. Quentin said it was insulting. I didn't respond. He said I was vindictive. I reminded him it was a legal agreement, one he had signed. Then he raised his voice. Called me a monster. Said I'd ruined my own family. I left the cafe before he did. His lawyer trailed after me and asked if my offer still stood. I said it did. He nodded and took my attorney's card. That night, I sat by the window in my new apartment and looked out at the river. No noise, no messages, just the hush of water and the slow turn of headlights below. And the quiet certainty that something had shifted and would not be shifting back. The first week in the new apartment was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. I unpacked slowly, one drawer at a time, one cupboard a day. The boxes from storage arrived on Tuesday, and I opened them as if I were sorting through someone else's life. I found Gordon's coin collection in a shoebox still labeled in his handwriting. I found the snow globe Olivia used to play with when she was little, the one with the tiny red barn and the horses that never quite stood up straight. I placed it on the bookshelf near the window. I didn't go out much that week, just the grocery store and the pharmacy downstairs. The woman at the front desk, Carla, always greeted me by name. She reminded me of someone, maybe a neighbor from long ago, but I couldn't place who. She offered to show me around the building one afternoon, and I said maybe another time. On Thursday morning, I called the bank and moved the house proceeds into a short-term investment account. I asked to speak with someone in person about setting up 2 separate trust funds. The woman on the other end was kind and efficient. She offered to make an appointment with a financial planner the following week. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Quentin, not even Eunice. I didn't write anything down, didn't leave a trail. That evening, I made a pot of tea and sat down with a yellow pad of paper. I wrote Olivia's name at the top of one page, Derek's at the top of another. I listed the things I'd want them to have, not money, not yet, but values. Lessons. I wrote about patience and self-discipline and listening to silence. I wrote about how Gordon used to say that not all wealth comes in numbers. I didn't know if they'd ever read any of it. I wasn't sure they'd care, but it helped somehow. Friday afternoon, I finally opened my email. Dozens of messages from Quentin, some short, some long. One was just a photo of the empty backyard with the caption, "Thanks, Mom." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked down the street and bought myself a real pearl necklace. Not costume, not plated, the real thing. The woman at the counter asked if it was a gift, and I told her yes. That weekend, I went through my address book and trimmed it down. Crossed out numbers that hadn't worked in years, removed entries for people I'd last seen at funerals. I kept the pages that had Gordon's notes in the margins. Sunday morning, I got a message from Hope. She said they were being forced to move out by the end of the month, and that the children were upset. She asked if I could reconsider. Said it wasn't too late to reverse things to repair the relationship. She didn't mention the lawyer. She didn't mention the offer they'd made in that cafe. I didn't answer. Instead, I called the bank again and finalized the trusts. $100,000 for Olivia, $100,000 for Derek. Each fund would mature when they turned 25. Neither Quentin nor Hope would have access. The trustee would be appointed independently. The documents would remain private unless I chose to disclose them. I asked that the confirmation paperwork be mailed to a post office box I'd opened near the apartment. I didn't want anything showing up on my doorstep. That evening, I sat out on the balcony with a cup of chamomile and watched the sun disappear behind the treetops. The river reflected the last light like a ribbon of glass. Monday, I went to a meeting for senior volunteers. A woman named Harriet ran it. She wore a red scarf and introduced me like I'd been expected. There were 7 others there, 2 men, 5 women, all retired, all eager to contribute. They needed someone to help with local tax clinics. I said I'd think about it. By Wednesday, Quentin had stopped calling. No new voicemails, no texts. The silence was noticeable but not unwelcome. I went to the symphony with Eunice that weekend. We used to do that once a season. She said I looked rested. I told her I'd been sorting through things. She nodded like she understood. On the way out of the hall, I passed a music store in the lobby. In the window was a student cello, bright wood, brand new. It reminded me that Olivia used to play. I stepped inside and asked about rentals. The clerk said they offered student discounts. I said it wasn't for a student. Not yet. He wrapped it carefully and carried it out to my rideshare. At home, I placed it near the bookshelf beside the snow globe. I didn't know if Olivia would ever come see it. I didn't even know if she remembered the feel of the bough in her hand, but it felt right having it there. Like leaving the porch light on, just in case. And the next morning, as I was placing my grocery list in my handbag, the building concierge handed me a small envelope. No return address, just my name in a girl's handwriting. Inside was a note. It read, "Thank you for the pie. I'm sorry about everything. I miss you." It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was from. I placed the note beside the cello and folded my grocery list in half. There was more to come. The note stayed on my table for 3 days before I touched it again. I hadn't opened the blinds. I hadn't moved the cello. I just let the apartment stay quiet so I could listen to what that silence felt like. On the 4th morning, I folded the note and slid it into a drawer lined with dish towels. I didn't know what I was saving it for, but I knew it wasn't something to throw away. Later that week, I found a flyer in the mailroom. A new reading program had launched at the local middle school, and they were looking for senior volunteers to help tutor twice a week. I signed up. The next morning, I met the coordinator in a bright little office with paper apples on the walls. She handed me a schedule, said most of the kids just needed a quiet listener, someone steady. That first day, I sat across from a girl named Raina. She didn't say much, just opened her book and started to read. She stumbled through the first paragraph, apologized, then kept going. Her voice got stronger by the end of the chapter. When the bell rang, she stood up and said, "See you Thursday, Miss Bambridge?" I nodded and said I'd be there. The walk home took me past a row of garden homes I'd always admired. One had a bird bath in the front yard shaped like a teacup. Another had wind chimes made from old spoons. The sun was low enough to cast soft shadows across the sidewalk. I paused outside one with pale shutters and a faded American flag by the porch. A woman stood inside the storm door brushing her dog. She waved. I waved back. That night, I slept without waking. No calls, no messages, just sleep. The next morning, there was another envelope in my box. This time, it was addressed properly. Frida Bambridge. Same handwriting. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. Grandma, I don't know if you'll write back. I hope you do. I wanted to say I didn't know what was going on. Nobody told me. I just heard yelling and crying, and then I was told we had to move. I didn't understand it then, and I still don't. But I miss you, and I miss playing music. I'm sorry if I was rude before. I didn't mean to be. Love, Olivia. There was a return address on the corner, just a mailbox in a strip mall on the edge of town. I recognized the zip code. I went to my desk and pulled out a blank card, one of the old ones with the watercolor flowers I used to keep for thank you notes. I wrote only a few lines. Dear Olivia, thank you for writing to me. I'm glad you miss music. I miss it too. I hope you're doing okay. If you want, the cello is still here. No pressure, just letting you know. Love, Grandma. I mailed it that afternoon. A week passed before I heard back. This time, the note was longer. She said school was hard, that things felt different now, that her parents didn't talk about me much, but she kept the snow globe in her room. She said she'd been trying to remember the song she used to practice, the one with the long notes that made the windows shake. She asked if I could help her find the sheet music. I went to the music store where I'd bought the cello. The clerk remembered me. I described the piece, slow minor key, lots of low notes. He guessed right on the third try. I mailed the music the next day with a soft cloth to wipe down the strings. The following week, Olivia wrote again. This time, she included a drawing, just a pencil sketch of a cello with her initials carved into the side. She asked if I would come to her school recital in March. She wasn't sure she'd be playing yet, but she thought maybe she'd be ready. She didn't mention her parents. I marked the date on my calendar. By then, things had started to shift in my own life. I'd begun leading 2 of the reading groups at the middle school. The kids called me Miss Frida now. I brought oatmeal cookies one day, and the room went silent for the first time all year. I started going to Sunday services again. I sat in the third pew from the back. The choir had changed since Gordon and I used to go. Fewer altos. But the hymns were the same. After church, I'd walk down the street to the same cafe where I'd once met Quentin and his lawyer. I always sat by the window, ordered the same thing, half sandwich, cup of soup, coffee. Never saw them again. One afternoon in February, I came home to find a large padded envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note from Olivia and a flash drive labeled, "Listen." She said it was her first full practice session. She wanted me to hear it. Said she wasn't ready for a real performance yet, but she was working on it. I plugged it into my old laptop and let it play. The opening was shaky. A few wrong notes. Then a stretch of slow, careful progress. Her bowing was stronger now. The tone had deepened. There was a pause, and then the same phrase repeated, this time without hesitation. The track ended with a quiet rustle and her voice saying, "I think I got it." I closed the laptop and sat still. The cello stayed by the window. The snow globe beside it. I didn't know if Olivia would ever visit, or if Quentin and Hope would ever understand why I'd done what I did, but that wasn't what I was listening for anymore. There was something else building in the quiet, a shift. A note held just long enough to change the shape of a room. The recital was set for a Thursday evening in early March. The school sent a formal invitation in the male beige cardstock with gold lettering and a faint border of musical notes. It felt like something you'd get for a wedding. I ran my finger along the edge and placed it on the kitchen counter beside my reading glasses. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. That afternoon, I ironed a pale blue blouse I hadn't worn in years. I clipped on the pearl necklace I'd bought myself last fall and slipped a folded handkerchief into my purse. I didn't expect tears, but it never hurt to be prepared. The school auditorium was smaller than I remembered. The walls had been painted a warmer color, and there were strings of paper lanterns above the stage. I found a seat near the back. No one noticed me. I didn't mind. A group of parents filtered in behind me. Most of them talked quietly or pointed out their children's names in the program. I found Olivia listed under intermediate soloists. Her name printed right there in ink. No asterisk. No parenthetical note. Just Olivia Bambridge. The recital began with a small string ensemble followed by 2 piano solos. Then a girl played a flute piece that fluttered like birdsong. The announcer called Olivia's name. My hands rested in my lap. She walked out in a dark dress, simple with a ribbon tied at the waist. Her hair was pulled back. She didn't scan the crowd. She just took her place, adjusted the music stand, and sat. The first note wavered. The second steadied. By the third, she had settled into the rhythm. It was the piece she'd sent me on the flash drive, the one that started slow and climbed like a hillside. I could see the small adjustments in her shoulders, the way her fingers knew where to go without checking. The tone was fuller now, the phrasing more certain. She reached the last section and held the final note longer than I remembered. It hovered in the room, quiet but firm, before fading. There was polite applause. Olivia stood, gave a small bow, and walked back behind the curtain. I stayed through the rest of the program. A boy played the saxophone, and 2 girls sang a duet that made the front row lean forward. When it ended, the lights brightened and people stood. I stayed seated. It took a few minutes before the students began filing out into the hallway. Some ran to their parents. Some clutched bouquets. Olivia came out last. She looked taller under the lobby lights. A little older. Still holding her music folder, still glancing around in that way she used to when she was little, as if scanning for something familiar. I waited until the crowd thinned. Then I stood. She saw me. She didn't smile, not right away, but her shoulders dropped and her mouth softened. She walked toward me. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I didn't know if you'd come. I was invited." She looked down at the folder, then back up. "Did you hear the mistakes?" I shook my head. I heard the ending. She gave a small smile. "Thank you for the music." "You're welcome." I reached into my bag and handed her a card. Inside was a copy of the sheet music with a post-it note that read, "Maybe next time duet." She didn't open it yet, just held it in both hands. From behind us, a voice called her name. Hope's voice. "I should go," Olivia said. "I know." She hesitated, then leaned in. "I think I'd like to come over sometime, if that's okay." "There's a cello waiting," I said. She nodded, turned and walked back into the crowd. I left through the side door. Outside, the air had shifted. Still cold, but the kind that came before a season changed. The following Saturday, there was a knock at my door. Not the building buzzer, a gentle 3-beat knock. I opened it to find Olivia standing there with a cloth bag over her shoulder. Her jacket was a little big, her shoes untied. "I remembered where you said you lived," she said. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked into the living room and stopped in front of the cello. "Is it really mine?" she asked. "For as long as you want it." She placed the bag down and ran her hand along the strings. "I didn't bring the bow. I wasn't sure." "That's okay. It's here." We spent most of the morning going through music. She played. I listened. We didn't talk much. It was enough just to be in the same room. Around noon, I made grilled cheese sandwiches, cut them diagonally the way Gordon used to do. She ate both halves. I offered her a ginger ale from the fridge. She asked if I had any of the cookies from before. "I'll bake some next time," I said. She smiled. Before she left, she asked if she could leave the cello at my place. Said it felt safer here. I said of course. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt different. Not fuller, just less empty. That evening, I sat at my desk and wrote a short letter to Derek. Just a note to say I was thinking of him, that I hoped he was well, that there'd always be a place for him here if he wanted one. I sealed it and placed it in the drawer with Olivia's first note. I didn't know what might happen next, but the ground had shifted just enough to steady one foot. The next time Olivia came over, she brought a black folder with a sticker on the front that said Youth Honors Concert. She placed it carefully on the table beside the cello and unzipped her jacket without saying much. I set out 2 mugs of hot cocoa and sat across from her at the kitchen table. The snow outside had softened everything covering the sidewalk and rooftops like a hush. She looked at me, then tapped the folder. "I got invited," she said. "It's not a solo thing, just an ensemble. But still." I nodded and waited. "They said it'll be recorded, like a real concert. There's even a reception after." "That's wonderful," I said. She sipped from the mug, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. "It came with this," she said. "From Mom." The paper was creased tightly like she'd folded and refolded it a dozen times. She didn't hand it to me, just read it out loud. "We're proud of you. You've come a long way. We hope you're enjoying yourself. Please remember not to let outside influences distract you." She stared at the last line. "I think that's about you," she said. I didn't answer. "She doesn't want me to invite you," she added. "I understand." She was quiet a moment, then said, "I already sent them your name for the guest list." We didn't talk much after that. She played a short passage she was working on, then asked for help tuning a low string. Before she left, she wiped the cello down with the cloth and returned it to the corner where she always kept it. As she zipped up her coat, she looked at me and said, "I don't think they're going to like it, but I don't care. I'll be there," I said. She nodded and left. The concert was held at the Cultural Center downtown. The building was newer than I expected, glass walls and a bright modern lobby with paintings of local landscapes. I gave my name at the check-in table, and the woman smiled. "Ah, Olivia's grandmother," she said. "She's very talented." I was shown to my seat in the middle section. As people filed in around me, I spotted Hope and Quentin a few rows back. They didn't see me. The concert began with a string trio, followed by a group performance with the full youth orchestra. Olivia was seated in the second row just left of center. Her bow moved in time with the others, but there was something distinct in her posture, something more rooted. She didn't glance toward the crowd once, just played. At intermission, I remained in my seat. A few parents wandered past me, chatting quietly. I heard Hope's voice again, closer this time. She was speaking to someone about seating arrangements, saying something about who was invited and who wasn't. I didn't turn around. When the performance resumed, Olivia had a short solo within a larger piece, no more than 16 bars, but she played it clean, crisp, with a tone that silenced the room. The applause after was warm, steady. Afterward, there was a small reception in the adjacent gallery. White tablecloths, lemonade, cheese cubes, and little sandwiches. I walked slowly around the edge of the room, admiring the student artwork hung along the walls. Then I heard my name. Frida. I turned. It was Hope. Her smile was tight. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said. "I was invited." "I see." There was a pause. People moved behind her, murmuring. I could feel her watching me. "She's been different lately," she said, pulling away, "saying things we don't recognize." "She's growing," I said. Hope glanced past me toward the back of the room. "We want what's best for her. So do I." She opened her mouth to respond, but Olivia appeared beside me. She reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Come see the gallery," she said. "They have a piece I helped with." Hope stepped back. "We'll be leaving soon," she said to Olivia. "I'm staying a little longer," Olivia replied. And that was it. No raised voices, no scene, just a small shift in gravity. We walked the length of the gallery. Olivia pointed out a collage made of torn sheet music and pressed leaves. Her name was listed among the contributors. As the room thinned, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a flash drive with a small blue ribbon tied to it. "It's the recording," she said. "For you." I took it and nodded. On the way out, we walked together until the parking lot split. She turned toward her parents' car. I watched her go. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low and the curtains open just enough to see the snowfall. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and let the music play. Her solo came at minute 43. I replayed it 3 times. The tone was deeper now, rounder, like something that had finally settled into its own shape. I turned off the laptop and sat still, listening to the silence that followed. It didn't sound empty anymore. It was late March when the envelope arrived. I recognized the district office's return address in the corner, and I knew before I even opened it what it was. Olivia had applied to the Fine Arts Summer Program competitive full scholarship if accepted. She hadn't mentioned it again after mailing the form, just kept practicing with quiet purpose like she'd already decided it was out of her hands. I didn't call her right away. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter and waited until Saturday when I knew she'd be coming by. She showed up in a long navy coat, her curls pulled back a little older somehow, in how she moved, how she stood. "There's something for you," I said, and handed her the envelope. She looked down at it, turned it over in her hands like she didn't recognize her own name. Then she opened it carefully, her fingers slower than usual. She read the letter in silence. Her face didn't change much, but I noticed the way her shoulders rose, then settled. She folded the letter and placed it in her coat pocket. "They said yes," she said. I nodded. "They want me to go for 6 weeks." "You should," I said. She sat down at the table and stared out the window. The wind had shifted and the last patches of snow were vanishing into the soil. "Mom and Dad don't know." I applied. She said, "I wrote the essay about you, about learning here." She traced the edge of her cocoa mug, then added, "They think it's just a hobby, something to round out a transcript." "What do you think?" I asked. She paused. "I think it's the only place I don't feel like I have to make sense to anyone." There was a long silence between us. A few days later, I received a call from Quentin. He asked if I'd be available to meet them, he and Hope, at their house to discuss the matter of Olivia's summer plans. I agreed. I'd been expecting it. Their house was quiet, professionally decorated, not a thing out of place. Hope gestured toward the formal sitting room. I took the same seat I'd taken when I first visited after Olivia was born. Quentin cleared his throat. "We'd prefer she not attend this summer program. She's already been accepted." "Yes, well, that's part of the concern," Hope said. She didn't tell us. She said she didn't think you'd support her. Hope raised her chin slightly. We're her parents. It's not about support, it's about responsibility. Direction. She's nearly 16, and she's been finding her own direction. Hope crossed her arms. And we've noticed the influence. She's become distant, defiant. Quentin leaned forward. This isn't personal, Frida. We appreciate everything you've done, but we think it's time she refocuses on her core studies. Science, math, something practical, and the scholarship. We'll decline it on her behalf, Hope said. It's not binding. She earned it. She earned our concern, Hope replied. She's still under our roof. I stood slowly. You can make your decisions, I said. But she's going to keep growing, whether you like the shape of it or not. I turned to leave but paused at the door. She's not defiant. She's becoming. That evening, I wrote Olivia a letter. Not advice, not comfort, just what I saw. How she carried her cello now, how her music had started to breathe like its own voice. I folded the letter and tucked it inside the folder she always left by the piano. The next week, she didn't show up for her usual lesson. No text, no call, just silence. I waited. Then on Sunday evening, there was a knock. She stood in the doorway cello case, on her back, wearing a jacket, one size too small, and holding a duffel bag. They said I had to choose, she said. So I did. She stepped inside, set the cello down carefully in its corner, and looked around, like she was seeing everything for the first time. I didn't bring much, she said, but I brought the letter. I nodded, then walked to the guest room to make up the bed. Outside, the wind had shifted again, but this time, it wasn't moving away. It was moving toward something. She stayed the rest of the school year with me. We fell into a rhythm: quiet mornings, long afternoons of practice evenings filled with the scent of stew or cornbread, the kind of meals that linger. Olivia kept her head down at school and brought home flyers for college prep workshops and open mic nights. She still practiced every day, though she didn't talk much about the summer program anymore. I knew she was waiting, bracing for something. One Friday in late May, we came home to find Hope's car in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch legs, crossed neatly at the ankle, a manila envelope on her lap. Olivia stopped short. I didn't say anything, just unlocked the door. Hope stood as we approached. I'd like a word, she said. Olivia looked at me. I nodded, then stepped inside. They talked on the porch for a long time. I watched from the kitchen window, not to eavesdrop, just to be near. Hope handed her the envelope. Olivia opened it slowly. I saw her brow furrow, then lift. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. When the door opened again, she came in holding the envelope like it was made of glass. They changed their minds, she said. They're letting me go. They even sent in the acceptance form. She looked tired, like she'd run a long way and only now realized she could stop running. They said it doesn't mean they agree, she added, just that they won't stand in the way. I nodded. That's still a door opening. She went to the piano and rested her fingers on the keys. Just rested. She didn't play. 2 weeks later, I stood in the terminal watching her walk toward security cello, strapped to her back duffel bag in hand. She turned once and waved. Not a big wave, just a small lift of her fingers, like she wasn't saying goodbye, just see you later. The house was quiet without her. Not empty, just different. I still boiled the kettle in the morning and listened for the echo of strings coming down the hallway, even when I knew they wouldn't come. She called once a week from campus, always out of breath, always surrounded by noise and music and motion. She told me about her roommate from Montana who played 5 instruments and a visiting composer who said Olivia had an intuitive ear. She never bragged, She just told me things the way you'd tell someone what kind of weather you were having, like it was happening whether you liked it or not. When the summer ended, she didn't come back right away. She stayed on through the fall as part of an extended mentorship program. She texted sometimes. Short things. We performed at the museum today. They let me teach a beginner class. Do you still have my blue scarf? Years passed. She wrote less often, but she always sent a card on my birthday. And every once in a while, a package would arrive, books of sheet music tea tins from places I'd never been, a photo of her standing on a stage, bow in hand, expression steady. One day, I opened the local paper and saw her name on the front page. Former resident returns to lead youth orchestra, the headline read. I read the article twice, then tore it out and placed it on the fridge. She came by later that week. A little older, a little surer. She stood in the doorway like she had years ago, cello at her side, smile small and steady. I have time now, she said. I was wondering if I could stay for dinner. I nodded. The kettle was already on. Some stories don't end with big speeches or sweeping gestures. Sometimes the ending is just a return, a quiet meal, a full chair, and sometimes justice is just a girl finding her own voice and using it. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to choose your path when others didn't see your worth, you're not alone. Feel free to share your story below or just know you're heard.